Hello and welcome to this episode of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. I'm John Cripwell, and today, we're thinking about why maths is one of the few subjects where people feel completely comfortable saying, I hated it at school. It's something we hear all the time from parents, from colleagues, from people who are otherwise confident, articulate, and successful. And very often that dislike gets boiled down to one idea: I wasn't very good at it. In today's episode, myself and my guest explore what sits behind that narrative, particularly for girls, and why confidence, belonging, and belief might matter just as much as content and exam technique. We talk about what happens to pupils who are capable but quietly opt out, why maths so quickly becomes framed as right or wrong, and how classroom culture, language, and expectations can either reinforce or disrupt that story. Although this is the primary maths podcast, today's conversation takes us into the secondary classroom as well and offers some reflections that are just as relevant in Key Stage 2 as they are at GCSE and beyond. My guest today is Emma Lockhart, Head of Maths at Mill Hill School, and I'm delighted to have her on the show. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. So as we're recording this, you have just, I think, begun your Christmas holidays. Are you, and obviously feeling suitably festive now, are you happy just to give us a little bit of context as to what your role currently is? And then one of the things that we always ask on the podcast is what your experience of maths was like at school yourself. So it might be interesting, especially given the context of what we're talking about today, just to explore that a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, not a problem. So at the moment, I am lucky to be head of maths at Mill Hill School. So it's sort of co-educational setting for years 9 to 13. So we only start in year 9, which is great fun. It's a big department. A-level maths in particular is very popular. So we get kept very busy there. But sort of slightly different to you in terms of that secondary setting these days.
Yeah. I understand A-level maths is now the most popular A-level, or has been for a couple of years. Is that right?
It really has been. And I think it's one of those ones where you have that traditional feel of what a head of department is, and then you explain you've actually got 14 members of brilliant teachers in your department, and everyone's like, oh, okay. And you're like, well, I think we've got 14 or so A-level classes across year 12 and 13 these days. So as I say, it takes up a lot of our timetables actually.
Which is fantastic, isn't it, to have so many pupils go on to study A-level maths, and it's excellent that it's so popular. I'd be interested to talk about the demographics of those pupils a little bit later, if that's okay. But just let's go back in time a little bit. What was maths like at? I'm guessing you're a maths teacher, you're head of a department of maths. I'm guessing you loved maths at school. True?
Yeah, I think definitely true. I think I was really lucky. I went to a whole variety of schools growing up. I spent a lot of time overseas as a child. So actually going to sort of international schools there, I think I really sort of thrived in places where you didn't have necessarily the pressures of following a national curriculum and things like that. So we just got to explore maths. So definitely really enjoyed maths from a young age. I come from a family of 2 accountants. I'm not sure I ever had a choice in sort of building up the maths there. And then kind of returned to UK education around year 3 time. So kind of readjusting back into an England sort of school program. I think I definitely had my rebellious phases where I decided I didn't want to be good at maths anymore, as I think is quite common for some particularly girls, where I remember qualifying for a maths camp in the summer of one year and having a very big debate with my family about why I didn't want to do that at the age of, I think I was 14, 15 at the time. But yeah, ended up, I did maths and further maths at A-level, went on to study it as a degree. And I think it kind of has been the one constant love of my life, I guess, throughout kind of growing up.
Fantastic. So I was interested then because we met originally very briefly at a conference in London where you were presenting a workshop which was sort of about pupils who maybe don't enjoy maths and or maybe have a negative opinion about it and how to support them. How did you end up, as somebody who clearly loved maths. Although you did say that you had a little bit of a rebellious phase.
Yeah.
Are you okay? Just talk about that a little bit more. Actually, I'm interested
Yeah.
in why, as somebody who was clearly confident and competent in the
Mm,
subject, when I think back to the subjects that I was confident and competent in, which did not include maths
mm,
at secondary school, those were the ones that I loved and wanted to do more of.
mm,
And I think about English or drama or a bit of science and things. I could have spent all day doing those. So
mm.
if you really enjoyed the subjects, why didn't you want to go to a camp that was dedicated to it? Sounds ideal.
I think there's two things. I think um, maths can often be seen, it's quite, a lot of people end up enjoying maths because they're good at it. And I think we do see a
Yeah,
lot of that still, that actually people feel like the enjoyment of maths comes from being successful in maths. And I think I went through that phase where I actually started to question, actually, do I enjoy this? I was also really enjoying my French lessons in particular. And actually going like, I really enjoyed this environment. It's a very different environment. And am I just doing maths because I'm good at it rather than actually
we
going,
were not the
there's
same.
something.
Can I just say, Emma, at school, I
Oh,
didn't do French. I did German, but that was not top of my list either. So it'd be interesting to see if there's any correlation between people who are enjoy maths and or sorry are good at maths and good at French.
yeah,
But
I
sorry,
think
yeah,
it's the grammar structures actually were really logical. So what I was really good at French was not sort of writing essays or long sentences. And actually, I did a French A level, and the part I struggled in was when they wanted me to write an English GCSE essay in French, and I went, like, I've struggled with the English GCSE essay and what to say. But I really like the sort of logic and the grammar structures. I could really understand that because that kind of just played into my brain. But I think it
yeah,
was just this instinct of I need to be like I'm good at this, but do I actually like it? And I think I had that real questioning phase of, I feel like I'm sleepwalking through into a degree here because that's what everyone's telling me I'll obviously study.
yeah.
And so then really trying to like question that for myself. And these days I'm a very self-confessed maths nerd, the sort of person who takes the maths challenges home with them to do overnight because why not?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you. We've ended up at a similar sort of place, I think. Although you were
Mm,
to a higher level, I guess, than myself. But yeah, it's interesting how people come to a love of maths from different
mm,
routes potentially.
yeah.
So why the focus on your workshop at the conference?
Mm.
How did you end up there? What did you notice that was interesting?
So I think for me, the whole way through actually, I've felt like my real goal as a teacher is actually to get everyone enjoying the subject. And I understand not everyone is going to take it as far as me and have study a degree, and that's okay. I always say it really saddens me, but it is okay. But actually, I want everyone to feel that sense of belonging in a maths classroom because I do think it's one of those subjects that really polarizes people. And I know, like
Yeah,
you said in the workshop yourself, you didn't enjoy maths at school, and it's sad how many people come out of our educational sort of structure feeling that way about something that actually does play such a vital role in our lives. And
yeah,
actually that willingness to sort of say I hated maths or I didn't enjoy it or I was really bad at it kind of underlines quite a lot of social culture. And the reason for the workshop is I'm quite a big netballer, or from a social level, not not the sort of the strongest netball player, but I enjoy playing it. And I remember watching um, sort of some netball on the TV, and you had the head of the England netball coach at the time who said, "Oh, I hated maths at school. I was no good at
mhm,
it." On this sort of broadcasting to an audience that is growing and is fundamentally mainly female at the moment. And I was just like, "Oh, this is so devastating for me as a maths teacher that like this is being like it didn't need saying quite frankly, but like actually the fact that that was part of the conversation around it was like, oh yeah, I couldn't add up those scores just then. I hated maths. And you just go, oh, really? And it was one of those ones where I sort of started to go, actually, what can I do in my role to kind of help try and change that narrative, even if it's a really small thing, and just starting
Well,
that conversation.
yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely something that we talk about quite a lot on this podcast and
Mm,
in my work generally. As somebody, as you say, didn't enjoy maths at school but came to
mm,
love it. That
yeah.
I don't think there's any reason why people can't see the pleasure in it. Um, but it's interesting, isn't it? You mentioned about the netball coach talking about I didn't enjoy maths at school. I couldn't add up those scores.
Mm,
It becomes very number and arithmetic focus quite quickly, doesn't it? I think in these conversations that people struggle with the relatively simple maths in terms
Mm.
of just adding a couple of scores together quickly in your head and things. And all of math seems to boil down to that, which is quite a large subject, really, to represent in just those terms.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I also think if they reflect on it, what they didn't like about maths was probably not that sort of arithmetic, actually. It's often the fact that actually we get quite abstract quite early. And it's often that sort of actually
Yeah.
puts people off. But you're right, it does very often sort of boil down to, can you do this calculation quickly? I think we've all had that fear at the end of eating a meal out. And then Bill comes in, we start talking about splitting. It's like, who's the resident mathematician? And we all
Yeah.
get that nervousness of like, oh golly, I suddenly have to do these calculations, don't I?
Shrinking your chair a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always there going like, it's my off day, it's my off day.
Yeah. No, I get that as well. Yeah. It's okay. My calculator's in my pocket on my phone. It's not a problem. Even after a couple of glasses of wine, we can still do it. Yeah, but you're right. There is that, and we know that there is that cultural phenomena, really, that maths in particular, people feel empowered to say that they don't get it, can't do it, and yet we know that there is, and we don't want there to be a stigma about it either, do we? Because we know that if we go the other way to something like reading, for instance, there's a huge stigma about not being able to read, and people don't want to admit that they can't read. There must be somewhere in the middle that you can say, actually, I am capable of doing this, but it's not my favourite subject. That should be fine, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the strength of the feeling that always surprises me. It's just how openly someone will say, I hate maths. It's always that word. And I think that's how I titled the workshop at the time, was it's got to have the word hate in it. And it's like, it's such a strong emotion. It's like, I'm not sure you hated it. You just found bits difficult, and that sort of bred this dislike. But actually, we often go very polarizing in it. And I think you're right that it does link into actually how people feel about English as well. More and more you see those similar ones. Like I was teaching some kids the other day in a lesson, and we just got them writing words, and I corrected some spellings at the same time. They're like, oh, it's not an English lesson, it's a maths lesson. I'm like, but like, actually, isn't it both? Aren't we just learning?
Yeah. There is a danger, isn't there, in splitting up those skills into really discrete domains. I'm interested in one or two of the things that came out of the workshop. We talked, and this sort of relates a little bit to the netball, I suppose, given that netball is, don't want to stereotype, but predominantly still a sort of female girls sport. As a dad of two girls, one of whom is hugely into her netball, and that takes up quite a lot of my life at the moment, actually driving all over the place to netball matches, which I love doing. But yeah, we've got one later today, actually. Is there a gender aspect to this, do you think, or not?
Good question. I think there is, in terms of, I think more and more, so as I might say, at the moment I'm in a co-educational setting, and I do think you do see a difference just in actually how pupils approach the classroom, both at your sort of high ability classes and your lower ability classes. I think the whole way through, often your boys want to do well in maths. They see the value in it. Even in your sort of, say, your sort of support sets, you've got pupils going, well, I need to get this grade because I want to study maths A level, even if that's not necessarily the right path for them. There's this continual thing, well, that's the A level I need to have, and that sort of motivation. Whereas I think a lot of the girls I see in those lower ability groups kind of go, I just want to pass. Like, I don't like, what is the easiest route for me to get out of this classroom, really? And that's very much their ethos going in, and it's that complete mismatch in aspirations for pupils of the same ability. I think you really do see just consistently through secondary school. I do think that's the biggest
interesting.
difference.
Yeah, it's interesting when we look at the data, and obviously I come at it from a primary point of view. When we look at Key Stage 2, end of Key Stage 2 data, there's not a particular significant gap between boys and girls attainment at the end of Key Stage 2 at the expected level, but we do already sort of see at the sort of greater depth level a greater number or greater proportion of boys attaining that greater depth level than girls. And I also know from visiting lots of schools and working with lots of teachers and head teachers one of the most common phrases that we hear is about less confident girls.
Mm.
And that's anecdotal. I don't have any particular data to back that up, but I think a lot of teachers listening to this from a primary
Mm.
setting will be familiar. We've got a group of less confident girls in maths.
Yeah.
I think if you look at English, it flips the other way.
Mm.
Girls seem to outperform the boys. I don't know that that there should be a biological reason for that, really. So again, does it come back to? We're guessing here a little bit, but perhaps it
Mm.
comes back to a cultural thing. We know at GCSE level, don't we, that there is an attainment gap, I think,
Yeah.
between boys and girls. And what happens at A level, Emma?
Um, I actually don't know if there's an attainment gap. You have a massive participation gap between it, and
Right.
I sort of, as part of my research, we just looked into actually take up at A level, and
Yeah.
it's really interesting how it splits across settings. So if you have a boys only school, the A level participation rate in maths is, 10-20% higher than it is for your sort of your co-ed or your girls only settings. And so you do just have this massive, as I said before, it's just this desire to do it, this value in STEM, this motivation to get involved in STEM in a much higher sort of rate, regardless of ability. And I think you're absolutely right. I think I ran some really interesting research with my classes last year because I had a top set year 11 class, actually pretty good gender split. We had sort of, I think
Yeah.
it was 8 girls, 10 boys. It was really nicely balanced. Everyone was really motivated. Everyone was really thriving. It was wonderful. I then looked at how many of them translated to my A level classes, and one girl had taken up further maths compared to, I think it was 7 of the boys. Um,
Wow.
and even from the girls, some of them aren't even doing A level maths anymore. And they're still getting graded as eights and nines. I have girls with grade nines at GCSE who aren't doing an A level in maths because they've gone on to
But you
do
would
something
think in any
else.
other subject, if you're getting a top grade,
Yeah.
it makes sense, doesn't it, that you would go on and study that at A level?
I think the biggest one is how they saw their own results actually. If you sort of set something, I think I often found the girls in the class would see the 10% they couldn't do or they'd struggled
Yeah.
with, and they went, therefore this is telling me that I don't belong in this class, or I shouldn't be pushing to do further because I'm at the limit of my capability. And they saw every incorrect answer as a reinforcement of that messaging, was every boy saw all the positives they got, and they sort of look at it as, oh, well, I got 80% right, so I'm really thriving here, I can do more, I need that challenge. And I think it was really interesting, like even for that, as I say, really high ability class, I think the girls often looked for those, or saw maybe rather than looked for all those things to negatively reinforce their view.
Which is interesting, isn't it, as a
Mm.
mindset? And this again can't just be a maths thing. I wouldn't have
Mm.
thought, but I do wonder whether there is a cultural link around how we talk about maths generally,
Yeah.
and how we feel, and that stereotype of the sort of person that is a mathematician.
Yeah.
Um, Again, just anecdotally, my eldest, in fact, both my daughters are good mathematicians. I'm proud to say, not
Mm-hmm.
anything to do with me particularly. They are they're doing well. I've got one daughter in year 3 who's just yeah, doing great, and then my eldest is in year 8, and she will come home and do some extra maths. The
Mm-hmm.
school uses an online, like a lot of schools do, an online homework system, and
Mm-hmm.
you can choose from extra things if you want to, and she will enjoy doing some of those, and we'll sit and do some of them together. Although she's beginning to get beyond my realms of expertise now already. Um, but the way that she talks about herself and maths, she would not describe herself as a good mathematician. She certainly wouldn't describe herself as somebody who loves maths, and yet she sits there doing extra maths in her own time, which it seems bizarre to me. And
Yeah.
I can imagine, as you say, a boy in a similar position wouldn't necessarily have any issue in saying, "Yeah, I'm really good at maths and I enjoy doing it."
Yeah, I think there's an objectivity to maths, isn't there? Where like so much of the time, and it's interesting because actually as you go up, there is less of that, although people still perceive that to be the main strength of maths as a subject. Is this right or wrong? And I
Yeah,
think actually as girls, like we're often preconditioned that we can't say I'm good at this thing. We don't that comes across as, I remember sort of growing up and being told that wasn't very modest of me, and sort of you had to everything had to be like, oh, well, like I understood that. You have to kind of soften everything to being about the topic rather than actually just being able to go, well, in black and white terms, I just got 100%. I've done all right.
Yeah, yeah,
And that I feel does come through, that actually you 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 almost become uncomfortable with the success in it, whereas actually you can feel like you've written a good essay and expressed yourself, and you can then talk about, well, I expressed this point, and it becomes
yeah.
much more about actually that subjectivity. I think we sit a lot more comfortably with, actually, because it doesn't have to be so black and white and, well, like, look at me, and it feels showy offy. And I, like, even to this day, I struggle to sort of say, like, oh, I'm a good mathematician, and like I know it's technically true, but it's uncomfortable. Like, it actually, like, it still makes me uncomfortable. I think we do see that a lot with our girls, is actually they don't want that. They kind of feel like it's I can't even think what the word is. I guess, like, they feel like it's wrong to sort of have that viewpoint, and I think that all out
Immodest,
emphasis.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or like you're showing off, or
Mm.
and again, I wonder whether it comes back to um, sports and things like that. We've mentioned netball already, but um, I'm thinking about. I taught in year six quite a lot, and I'm thinking about the boys who at break time would be out playing football in the court
Mm.
every day, and there was a huge competition amongst them about who was doing better than the other, and they would have absolutely no problem in declaring themselves better than somebody else
Mhm.
in that domain. Again, this is all anecdotal and just my
Yeah.
thoughts on it, I suppose, but I do wonder whether there's just something about how we celebrate success,
Mm.
and how we talk about ourselves being successful in things,
Yeah.
and the
I think
opportunities to do that.
I do think we see that in the classroom, though. I think there's a lot of sort of evidence out there that talks about competition being a really great thing for helping boys thrive, and that desire to be the best is really motivating for boys, and actually girls really don't often like competition. And again, we're sort of very generalizing stereotypes, but actually they prefer things that are much more collaborative teamwork, which is funny because once you get to sort of university level, research level maths, that's what it needs to be. It's not one person locked in a room a lot of the time. It's really collaborative, and that's how you solve problems. But actually, so much of sort of our sort of maths education becomes about competition and exam performance, particularly at sort of a secondary level. Um, and I think that sort of puts off actually people who'd really enjoy some of those nicer areas of maths.
Which is all music to my ears in a way, Emma, because a lot of the work that has gone on, I think, in primary classrooms over the last 5-6 years has really focused on a more collaborative approach
Mm.
to maths in particular, and to problem solving, as you say, and it not being about a competition as to who can finish their work first and who can
Mm.
get all the answers correctly. And one of the things that we talk about quite a lot on this podcast, is about the answer not necessarily being, the thing that we should be rewarding, but
Mm.
actually the process of how we get there being much more interesting,
Yeah.
and how you can approach a novel problem,
Mm.
or a non-routine problem, and the habits and skills that you have in order to help you to do that. And we talk about maths
Mm.
being a problem-solving subject, and skills that will um, leach off into other areas of people's lives, and curriculum, and things like that. So, do you think that the way to begin to, or one of the ways that we might begin to redress this, is through that slightly more collaborative approach to learning, in primary and in secondary, and opening up opportunities for talk and discussion and seeing things from other points of view, and not necessarily focusing on uh, it's difficult, isn't it? Because we know to pass
Mm.
an exam or a test at the end of it, we need to
Yeah.
get the right answers. That is clearly part of maths.
Mm.
Um, but that journey to get to that point is, I would say, potentially more important.
I think definitely. I think it kind of becomes about what's our role as educators, right? It is it to get them to pass the exam, or actually is it to build all the skills around that? Can they be problem solvers? Can they articulate what they're doing and communicate that? I think a lot of the work we end up doing for a lot of our university applicants is actually, yes, you can solve the problem, but can you articulate exactly what you did in that thought process to kind of make it happen and to kind of go through that. And I think all of that becomes this collaboration and sharing ideas, hearing other people's ideas, and just kind of trying to work through that to getting to an answer. And it doesn't have to be just your idea, because actually fundamentally when you get into the world of work or any sort of thing, actually listening to others and being able to take on their ideas is a really great thing. And that doesn't just kind of work in a math sphere, it works in everything we do. And I think it's those soft skills actually that are a really important part of education. And it's really tricky, because I know particularly when we've got GCSE exams, there is a lot of curriculum to cover. I know your national curriculum for primary as well is huge, although
Yeah.
hopefully there's some tweaks soon. And it's how do we fit that balance of making sure they can do those skills, but actually sort of take away some maybe the focus on that and about all those things around it. Because if we spend that time there, will it actually help them with learning those skills later down the line?
Well, I think one of the things that you've just mentioned, actually, that word skills is
Mm,
really important, and I think it's something that we have focused on less in the last, or the curriculum seems to focus on less.
mm,
As you say, the curriculum at Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 is packed, and there is
mm,
feels like there's very little time to spend exploring things in the way that you might
mm.
want to. But I would argue that it's beneficial to try and find that time to do that, because it's a better way forward.
Yeah.
But I think there's potentially an overemphasis on knowledge as well at
Mm,
Key Stage 2 particularly, and we focus, if we're not careful, the curriculum seems to focus quite a lot on procedure and that
mm,
sort of thing. Whereas the things that you're talking about, Emma, the skills, thinking skills and reasoning skills, and knowing what to do when you don't know what to do, is
yeah.
more important as a life skill,
Yeah.
for want of a better word, than just being able to memorize a lot of facts and procedures, surely.
Indeed. And I think this is probably when you see that difference between actually how we approach maths in primary versus secondary, because I think because secondary becomes much more exam focused, actually you see a massive increase in the number of people from both genders who actually dislike maths. I think it is
Right.
because it suddenly becomes this lesson we're teaching you this procedure, and then this lesson we're teaching you this procedure, and then this one, and it becomes quite routine driven. And I think it's when you get this sort of, well, why are we learning this? What's the point? And I think a maths teacher hears that more than any other subject teacher, even though you could probably argue that, learning how to read a Tudor source is not going to necessarily have direct implications for their lives, but they see the other skills they're building up. Whereas in
Yeah.
maths, I think we get so focused on this. Can you do this skill? Can you, whatever it is, whether it's adding fractions, solving an equation, that becomes all they see, and they don't recognize what they're actually doing around that process. Um, I think is a really, I think of,
Yeah. I mean,
it's an
I
interest.
distinctly remember sitting in my own maths GCSE and looking at a question and just thinking, I cannot remember what to do to solve this type of calculation. I can't even remember what it was.
Mm,
Something probably to do with fractions or algebra, knowing me. But not thinking, what does it mean? Or, can I begin to unpick it? Just thinking, I just cannot remember the procedure to do this.
mm,
And at no point did it occurred to me that actually I didn't necessarily need to remember the procedure if I understood what it meant. I didn't
mm,
understand what it meant, and I didn't know the procedure. So that conceptual understanding is fundamental, isn't it?
yeah,
To being able to approach things like that and not have it become just a feat of memory,
yeah.
and rote memorization.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had one of my classes, and there was one of these sort of support sets, who sat a test the other day, and he sort of said, "Well, you didn't tell us how to do exactly every single one of these questions." And it was like, "Well, actually, I did. It's just I didn't show you an exact case of all these questions, because actually that's never going to happen. And here's all these ones that were exactly the same, and here's all the theory you did know. We've just got to apply it." And it was really interesting. And particularly, I think what was interesting was that instant switch was it was my failure as a teacher, and there was a lot of this trying to push it back to me, and actually, well, you didn't prepare us enough for this, rather than kind of seeing actually everything else that had gone on that they kind of weren't willing to acknowledge because they'd struggled in that instance.
Where, what other things do you think teachers can do, that gives a sense of belonging or belief in
Mm.
pupils when it comes to maths? What are the, not the quick wins, Emma, because we know that there's no such thing really, but how can we begin to develop a classroom culture that makes it,
Mm.
um, more acceptable to consider yourself a good mathematician, or to believe that it's something that you can do?
Yeah, I think, and it's always a funny one, right? When you talk in these podcasts, and I know the people listening to these podcasts probably do all these things because they're the ones who are interested and engaging. Um,
But as you say, we've got to start somewhere, haven't
we
we?
got to
So
start somewhere.
we can
So
start
I
spreading the
think
word.
it's creating that positive atmosphere and actually making it a safe space to fail. Because actually, if we're doing problem solving, a lot of that time will be not getting to the right answer or not even feeling like we've got anywhere, and actually making that okay. Because I think for a lot of our pupils, they'll be going, well, actually, I've been sat here for 10 minutes, I've got nothing to show for it. And that naturally starts to build this anxiety of, well, the teacher's going to tell me off. It's not like I've not been working. And actually creating that space where it's okay for that, like for you to have got stuck, and that the fact that you're thinking it through and then what steps have you taken. So just any sort of work we can do to make pupils feel safe to fail, I think is really great. I think positive praise, but positive praise for the right things. So it's not necessarily just about getting the answer right, because that's very easy to praise, it's very easy to see, but actually one of my big focuses this year is praising learning behaviors. So if someone has gone away and done some extra year 8 maths sort of work like your daughter's done, actually making sure I've rewarded that as well, because that's great. Even if it's not kind of come at 100% in a test, actually it's still a really positive learning behavior. Actually that person's worked really hard. They still only got 6 questions done, but actually for them that's a really great achievement. And
Yeah.
signaling those things I think is really important, so that they can see it's not about a success, it's about trying the right things, because actually long term that will breed the bigger success for them.
And it can be difficult, can't it, when you've got so in a primary school in Key Stage 2,
Mm,
30, 32, 33
yeah.
children in the class, and
Mm,
you want to make them all feel like individuals that are,
mm,
doing their best, but it can be tricky to do that.
mm,
However, from all the conversations that I've had on this podcast, the thing that we keep coming back to is the importance of relationships and
yeah.
pupils feeling like they belong in a place.
Mm,
And again, it's slightly different in primary in that more than likely you've got the same teacher for maths as you have for
mhm,
every other subject. But there's still that time, I think, when it's, right, we'll get our maths books out now, that some children just think, okay, either I've disengaged now because this isn't
mm,
for me, or, this is going to be a really hard hour that
yeah.
I've got to get through. And if we can
Mm,
do something, I think, to begin to shift that sort of
yeah.
mindset a little bit, then that's got to be
Yeah.
a positive thing.
I think the other one is just shifting our vocabulary. I think it's really easy to go, oh, this is an easy question, or, this is something you've been doing for ages, so you'll find this no problem. And actually being really mindful for those pupils who are disengaging, who are struggling. All they hear is this negative reinforcement. They go, well, I can't do it, and it's meant to be
Yeah,
easy. And
yeah.
actually, we're doing that in a way to build their confidence, because this is really easy, you can do it. But actually, it can have the absolute opposite effect for some of those
There's a
pupils who are
there's a real
struggling.
difference, isn't there, between, oh, come on, we did this last week,
Mm,
or now think back to last week. Did we look at something similar to
exactly.
this? And one is supportive, and the other is sort
Hmm.
of accusatory, isn't it? And
Yeah.
just a small shift in tone and
Yeah.
language can make a big
It
difference
was
there. You're
interesting.
right.
I was observing someone the other day, and we sort of talked about, they went, oh, this is great, everyone gets it. And actually having to talk them through that there were actually 3 people who didn't. And
Yeah.
it was a really great, it helped build pace and everything like that. But actually for those 3 pupils, they were sat there going like, well, I don't get it. So how am I even going to like begin to do the rest of this lesson? And just being mindful of that, because actually, yes, she did go and see them later, but almost the damage is still done. They've probably switched off for 10 minutes because, well, they couldn't do the easy bit, so they're out, and it becomes this very sort of sit back in your chair sort of.
So what do you do for those 3 pupils, Emma? Because I think this is the big. There'll be teachers sitting there thinking, well, okay, yeah, and I know
Mm,
who those 3 pupils are likely to be
hmm.
in my class because I know my class and we've got good relationships. But I've got to cater for the majority
Yeah.
to move the lesson on. So how do I ensure that those 3 pupils feel like they are worthwhile being in the lesson as well?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I said at the time was, rather than just saying everyone's got it, just saying the majority have got it, because it still acknowledges that you spotted those pupils like they're there, and you might even then go, okay, for those who weren't so sure, this is it, and you can do a quick explanation, you can show, and you might even sort of go, for those who did get it, this is how I want you to present it. So there's still an area of focus for those who did get it right, but making sure they're still getting those learning points, but you're also kind of very subtly going through it at that point. And then it might be you go, okay, everyone, I want you all to have a go at this question independently, and then you visit those 3 pupils at that point. You kind of create an opportunity for yourself to split.
Yeah.
It could work. I appreciate, as you say, there's a lot more of you in a classroom and a much bigger range of abilities than sort of we have in secondary in one
Yeah.
classroom. But
Yeah, but again, I think that there are things that you can do around seating
mm,
plans and things, and thinking very carefully about what those look like. Again, when it
mhm,
comes to confidence and things, I've never found that it's a great idea to sit one of your highest attaining mathematicians next to one of your lowest attaining
yeah,
mathematicians, because that gap is so great. But
mhm,
if you know that you've got somebody who is confident but also patient and willing to have those conversations with
mm,
somebody who maybe wants to get it but isn't, then if you compare
yeah.
those sorts of pupils up together, that can have a really beneficial impact.
I know,
um
sorry, I've got a colleague who really loves to sort of, she'll do 3 options for questions, and she's got a cautious, a confident, and a super confident. I think that's a
yeah,
really nice way, again, that you can kind of steer people to appropriate amounts of stretch, or you can go, okay, if you're feeling super confident, have a go at this, whilst the rest of us talk through this one, and kind of giving people that sort of option there. Although I appreciate
yeah.
sometimes, I imagine you have the people who feel super confident, and you need to sometimes
Yeah,
reel them
all
back
those
in.
things are yeah, um, options, aren't they? They're
Mm,
tools that we've got in the toolkit that we
yeah.
can use when appropriate, I guess.
Mm,
Um, and I think one of the changes that has been made over the last few years, again, is much more emphasis on teacher modelling things.
mm,
So again, thinking back to my own primary education, particularly, I don't remember any modelling of things. It
mm,
was, either just very instructional. This is how you do it. Do that.
mm,
There was not a lot of thinking aloud, or this is what I've noticed. And I think those things can help. To me, anything that helps make a connection
mm,
explicit,
yeah.
that is otherwise implicit, and some children will get it and some children won't see it.
Mhm,
Those are the things that can make a real difference, I think, and just over learning some of those things
yeah.
can really help. And that comes back to the representations we use, the manipulatives that we use, and all of those sorts of things that can open up what might otherwise be a closed door for some pupils.
Yeah, I think you've got to think about where was everyone's first exposure for maths, and actually it is in some of those representations. So I've got an 18-month-old boy at the moment. He is just starting to figure out numbers, but for him, numbers are like 1 because he has one thing, or he has 2 because he has 2 things, and like
Yeah.
that's sort of the level he's at. But it is those concrete representations, those physical manipulatives. That's where we all started. We didn't start by kind of counting on our fingers or anything. We actually went with, I've got 1 thing, 2 things, or I've got lots of things because I've stolen them
Yeah,
all.
this is very concrete for your son
Yeah.
at the moment,
Yeah.
isn't it? And but he will learn very quickly with those things, and we can.
Mhm,
I think where we lose pupils often is when things become abstract too quickly.
mm,
And it was interesting. I was talking to a guest about this a few weeks ago, thinking about A level maths particularly. I know a
mhm,
lot of my friends and things that were great at GCSE, and then they did A level maths, and suddenly they felt completely out of their depth.
mm,
And then I equally know somebody who went on to do maths at degree level, and changed to do physics instead, because he just found that he was out of his comfort zone a little bit. And I think that there is that point for everybody where maths
mm,
suddenly becomes abstract.
yeah.
More, suddenly you lose the thread of what it is. And for
Mm,
some pupils, that happens in key stage 2. And
yeah.
for some people, that happens at A level. And if we can be aware of that, then we can help them to sort of refine that
Yeah.
sure-footedness, rather than it just being an intangible, abstract concept.
I definitely emphasize that with that. A lot of my A level kids are always fascinated to hear I wasn't allowed a calculator for my university exams, and trying to explain to them that there weren't any numbers to do calculations with, so it wouldn't have like it wasn't them penalizing me, it just didn't have any use. And they're always like, that's crazy, because actually
that doesn't
and
sound
you're
like
right,
maths is numbers, right?
but it gets more and more abstract as we go up, and I think it's about trying to link those abstract concepts to what they know already and actually trying to get them to fulfill. I mean, it's still, when you do probability in your secondary school, are you getting out dice and cards and actually letting them see these things in action? Can still actually be quite powerful, even when it feels like we should be looking at just the theoretical side of it.
Totally agree. And the beauty in maths for me is it is one of the most interconnected subjects. Everything links to everything else in some way or another, at least in my understanding. Emma, you might say when it gets to degree level it's totally disconnected, but for me everything links, and if I can understand addition, then I can understand multiplication, and if I can understand multiplying two integers, I can understand multiplying two fractions, because it's the same thing conceptually. It's just understanding what that looks like and how it's related. But I think in the past, and I'm hoping we're moving away from this, those connections just weren't made explicit enough. And this week we're learning fractions. That has nothing to do with what's gone before. It almost feels like a brand new thing. And actually we need to show that if you can subtract two integers, then you can subtract one fraction from another fraction. It's the same process. It means the same thing. We just have to be aware of what it is that we're dealing with.
I think that's when curriculum design can have a really sort of be really important with that, and actually trying to build some of those links, and pairing some sort of statistics work after some number work, where actually it's still doing those number calculations but in a data handling context, or proportion and then pie charts. All those things can actually really link up, so that they are practicing the same skills and not seeing it as, well, I'm doing a pie chart now and I was doing fractions beforehand, and actually seeing how they sort of kind of relate to each other.
I could talk to you about this sort of stuff all day, Emma, honestly, but time is getting away from us, and you do have an 18-month-old who needs to go and explore Christmas a bit further. Thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. If people want to catch up with you, where's the best place to find out more about you and your work, Emma?
Probably LinkedIn at the moment. I'm not very big on social media. I probably should be on it more. So I'm quite easy to find on LinkedIn at the moment.
Okay,
or just
lovely. I'll pop a link to your LinkedIn profile, if you like, in the show notes, Emma. And then if people want to get in touch or ask anything, then they absolutely can do. But equally, if you would like to get in touch with the show, we can pass on any comments to Emma ourselves as well. Or if you've got anything to say on the things that we've talked about today, as ever, you can find us on pretty much any of the social media platforms, or email primarymathspodcast@twinkle.co.uk. Becky and I will be back on Friday to discuss this episode in a little more detail in our Aftermaths episode. But otherwise, we'll be back next week with another interview. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you then.